Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of our Chapter 2 discussion regarding the recording process. Taking a look back in terms of what we discussed in the earlier sessions. Basically, we tackled six learning objectives wherein we have like your defining accounts, understanding debits and credits, all the way to mastering the recording process and then introducing ourselves to the trial balance. So for today's lecture, like what we've mentioned, we're gonna be focusing on mastering all of these concepts using the exercises for chapter 2 in terms of making sure na gets na natin in terms of yung debits and credits. So if chapter 1 was really all about understanding the underlying theories, the underlying frameworks, the basic foundations of accounting, particularly yung assets is equal to liabilities plus equity, chapter 2 will really put you in the shoes of an accountant in terms of their day-to-day activities, particularly the bookkeeping method or the recording process, right? So for today, using all of the exercises, we'll take a much deeper look in terms of like the whole accounting process. So with that said, let's go through our exercises breakdown for today. So in terms of the recording process. So similar to what we did last week, this is gonna be a session of give and take. So if meron kayong mga exercises na you want to recite, kindly prepare na lang and then I'll ask for volunteers. But before that, we'll just go through quick concepts lang together para we make sure na tama yung flow or mind map in our heads, right? So before anything else, so basically in terms of our chapter 2, we have 5 exercises. And like what I mentioned, and I think clearly evident sa quiz, a lot of you have really good procedural frameworks in terms of solving for the right solutions. So for chapter 2, we're gonna be doing the same thing. Let's try to identify what are the different question types for each exercise. And then let's try to match ano nga ba yung underlying framework in terms of how to best solve for this. So this is the guide natin for later. But then we'll go through naman each exercise together. So moving on, just a quick recap. So number 1, super important to understand for chapter 2 would be in terms of theory, we have to know 3 things. Number 1, what ultimately is an account? What is our definition of account? And in relation to this, we have to master the concept of debit and credit, right? So just a review. So basically, an account, again, is the building block of the whole recording process. So meaning that an account is an individual accounting record of your accounting components. So an account can be an asset, a liability, or an equity. And then, ang importante sa account is that through the whole accounting period, so let's say for a month or for a year, what it does or what it helps you to do is that it helps you track your increases and decreases in your specific accounting components. So again, these are just some of the examples of your accounts. And like what we mentioned before, in terms of like the number of accounts, you can actually refer to a company's chart of accounts. Doon nakalista lahat ng mga accounts nila that they use for their day-to-day operations. So kindly note that in terms of accounts, super important pa rin na we categorize them in terms of assets, liabilities, and equity, given that we're still going to be using the underlying equation of assets should be equal to your liabilities plus equity. Now, again, this is where, so now that we know what an account is, the next step is then, it said na it helps you track your increases and decreases. And in order to do that, our accounts, there's a tool called a T account wherein it shows you the history of an account, right? So meaning it gives you 3 components: the beginning balance of any account, the changes in the accounts represented by your debits or credits, and then the ending balance of the account. So one challenge for you, one of the things na I noticed in the quiz, we're really good procedurally. Pero pag iba na yung given, medyo na-challenge yung iba in terms of like paano itatawid or paano itatahe back to our lesson. So, for example, for T accounts, be prepared for scenarios such as, binigay yung ending balance and then binigay si beginning balance. You need to be able to identify what are the missing changes in the account in order to bring your beginning to your ending, for example. Or alternatively, si beginning balance yung wala. pero binigay sa inyo yung changes in the account and the ending balance. You need to be able to understand the relationships in order to solve back or reverse engineer to the beginning balance. So again, like what I mentioned, the challenge here is that we give you the fundamental insights, pero in terms of parang hinihimay, kindly make sure na very flexible kayo in terms of understanding these key concepts. So with that said, given that we have a T account, basically the importance of your T account is that in essence, it helps you also balance your debits and credits, right? And with that said, just a review. So again, chapter 1, our God accounting was your assets or what you own should be equal to your liabilities, which is basically your obligations to third party, and your equity or your own investments that you put up in your business. So assets is equal to your liabilities and equity. But at the same time, your left side of the equation should always equal your right side of your equation. And therefore, we arrive with the second fundamental equation for chapter 2, right? Which is that our debits should equal to our credits. So that in terms of the two most important equations so far, aside from the assets is equal to liabilities plus equity, the next one that we wanted to highlight would be our debits and should be equal to your credits. And then from there, we derived our expanded accounting equation or what we call our debit credit version, wherein it was the expanded accounting equation and then nilipat lang natin si expense and si owner's drawings to the left side in order for them to be positive. And therefore, we arrive with our very first framework or the thing that you really have to master, the thing that hopefully you really understand, pero at the most minimum basic requirement, kailangan memorize nyo to. Kasi if nagkamali kayo in terms of understanding kung ano yung normal balances of the account, then mahirapan tayo sa journal entries and then tuloy-tuloy na yan all the way to your trial balance. So the beauty of our expanded accounting equation with our debit and credit version is that it's very intuitive. So hatiin mo siya, you have your left side accounts comprised of your assets, expense, and owner's drawings. And then you have your right-hand side accounts, which is your liabilities, your owner's capital, and your revenue. So pag left, the normal balance would be debits. Pag right, the normal balance would be credits. And then, in terms of the changes, if it follows the normal account, so kung debit to, then it will increase. If it goes against the normal account, then it would be a decrease. So if your normal account is a debit, then a credit will decrease it. So inversely, if your normal account is a credit, pag may credit yan, then that would be an increase in your credit. And then, pero pag debit, it would be a subtraction in your credit balance. Right? So for those, I promised some people na I will also revisit it or parang another way of looking at it. So I understand na parang we have different ways of understanding. So let's try another way of understanding paano ba natin naturally derive yung normal formula or normal balance. So kindly in the chat, kindly identify in the matrix provided, what are the accounting components na mali yung normal balance nila. I'll give you a minute or 30 seconds. Yeah. So among these 6, ano yung mali na normal balance? Which accounts? Is it the assets? Is it the liabilities? The revenue, the expense, the owner's drawings? Okay, so Denise, Marco, Sky, Clarence. Okay, yeah. So correct. So as you can see, ang mali dito is yung credits, right? Your expense and owner's drawings. So the reason why I arrived with this was that in our normal expanded accounting equation, yung left-hand side mo lang naman talaga is your assets, right? So debit sila. And then on your right side, you have your everything else. So lahat credit. Pero ang mali dito, which is correct, most of the class correct, expense and owner's drawings should have a debit balance. Now, intuitively, paano natin i-rationalize? Bakit ang weird? Yung lahat ng nasa right side, credit, pero si expense and si owner's drawings lang yung naiba. This is where papasok yung equation, right? na the equation kasi is liabilities plus owner's capital plus revenue minus expense minus owner's drawings. And in math, when you have a negative, you make the inverse of that number, right? Meaning that the expense and the owner's drawings accounts, rather than increasing your equity, actually decreases it. And therefore, inverse siya of the normal balance of what an equity account should be. And therefore, even though they're technically in the right-hand side using this expanded accounting equation, dahil may negative na naka-attach kay expense and may negative na naka-attach kay owner's drawings, ang ibig sabihin, baliktad siya. Meaning expense will then have a normal balance of a debit rather than a credit. And then owner's drawings will have an inverse normal balance of a debit and a credit. Even though in this initial formula, they're in the right-hand side, right? So pick your poison in terms of like understanding or rationalizing. Either you can go with the first thing that we learned last week, wherein you just use the debit-credit version of the expanded accounting equation, or you use the original accounting equation, pero just take note na si expense and si owner's drawings are inverse accounts under this equity component. And therefore, even though nasa right-hand side siya of this accounting equation, it will still be debits, right? So kindly let me know if there's questions lang. So either raise your hand in the or type in the chat. But if everything's clear, so basically, yun. So in essence, our debit accounts would be assets, expense, and owner's drawings. So let's make sure na everything is aligned using our exercise 2.1, wherein honestly, in terms of the question type, this is primarily theory. I don't expect it to come out in our quizzes and exams. But in essence, if it's super important siya in a sense that if hindi nyo to ma-perfect, then you'll really have a bad time in your exams. Kasi yun yung debits and credits would be the foundation of all of the frameworks that we'll be using for today. So kindly make sure na memorize nyo lahat. Never make mistakes in terms of the normal balances. Do a lot of exercises para second nature na sa inyo. What are the normal balances of these? So with that said, are there any volunteers with answering 2.1? There. Okay. MJ? Yeah. Okay. Hi, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. So for this MJ, so basically I already listed down the 6 accounts. So your accounts payable are advertising expense, revenue receivables, owner's cap, and owner's drawing. And then basically the things that I will ask would be 3 things. So basically, number 1, identify kung ano yung component nila. Then second, let's determine the normal balance together. And then finally, let's analyze the debits and credit effects. Okay, so let's start with accounts payable. Our accounts payable would be under what accounting component? Assets, liabilities, or equity? MG.
Sir, liability po.
Yeah, correct. And then therefore, what would be the normal balance of our accounts payable?
Credit.
Correct. And then, so meaning, debit, credit, would it be minus debit? Sorry. So what would be the effect of debit? Sorry.
Decrease po, sir, and increase in credit.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So advertising expense would be under what component of assets, liabilities, equity, revenue, or expense?
Expense, sir.
Yeah.
Expense.
So expense. The normal balance would be therefore
Debit.
yeah. And then the changes would be
Increase in debit and decrease in credit.
correct. And then moving on, so revenue, what would be the normal balance of our revenue?
Credit, sir.
Yeah. And then the changes would be
Decrease in debit and increase in credit.
correct. And then receivables would be under what accounting component?
Asset, sir.
Okay, correct. And then therefore, lahat ng assets, what would be the normal balance of all assets?
Debit, sir.
Okay. And then the changes would be
Increase in debit and decrease in credit.
yeah. And then finally, we have our owner's capital and owner's drawing. So what would be the normal balance of our owner's capital?
Credit, sir.
Yeah. And then the changes would be
decrease in debit and increase in credit.
Correct. And then finally, for owner's drawings.
Normal balance is debit, so increase in debit and decrease in credit.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much, MJ. So actually, very simple, very straightforward. So again, as long as you memorize the matrix, these types of things would come naturally to you. So thank you so much, MJ. So again, the basis or second quiz, the core thing that you really have to memorize would be this debit credit matrix. Okay. So moving on, we're able to finish na our 2.1, right? So that is, we finished yung debit and credit. So now that we're aligned, okay, so alam na natin yung fundamentals. We know what are accounts, we know what are debits and credits. We move on to the recording process. So the recording process, again, is broken down into 3 major steps, right? Analyze the transaction, journalize the entry, and then post to your ledger accounts. And then, lagyan na lang natin ng last step, which is after mo i-post sa ledger, gumawa ka ng trial balance, ultimately, it will help you write your reports and communicate to your users using your financial statements. So last week, we mentioned na in terms of the second level, so super clear, I'm very proud na everyone's very clear when it comes to the level 1 of accounting. So let's go to the second level. So before, the very core thing that we wanted you to master would be advanced transaction analysis, right? And in essence, we're just gonna be doing the same thing in chapter 2, but using but in 2 ways, right? So we're gonna be analyzing it in a per transaction basis using the journal entry accounts. And then second, we're gonna analyze it in a per account basis using our account ledger and our P accounts. But in essence, it's still the same exercise as analyzing our transactions. So what do we mean by this, right? So before, in chapter 1, binigyan tayo ng Meowly, right? So ever famous Meowly. So basically, yung tinest ng quiz 1 was how good are we at analyzing Meowly's transactions using advanced transaction analysis. So using these 12 transactions, we were able to come up with our advanced transaction analysis. But in the real world, in the actual shoes of an accountant, in the recording process, the advanced transaction analysis actually is merely a tool to analyze transactions in a given period. Pero in terms of their day-to-day, they mostly use journal entries, and they, at the end of the period, they post to ledger accounts, right? But then, wag kayo matakot because it's still the same thing. What we're just doing is that we're analyzing each transaction using journal entry, so per transaction basis. So the first level of analysis that they do is a per transaction basis using their journal entry, right? So what do we mean by this? Meaning, let's look at Meowly number 1 transaction, invested 15,000 cash. Basically, aside from parang filling up the first row of this advanced transaction analysis, they also make journal entries, right? Every transaction, kaya per transaction basis, right? So every time may transaction ka, the very first thing you'll do is create a journal entry, right? Meaning that there are 12 rows here in our advanced transaction analysis, meaning we can expect na in the Meowly example, you'll have 12 journal entries, right? So that's what we mean by the first level of analysis. We analyze in a per transaction basis, and then at the end of the period, we do a per account basis. So basically, we summarize lang the changes. So if cash, yung starting balance niya is 0, and then yung ending balance niya is 18,900, what are the changes in the account because of all the transactions that led from 0 to 18,900? And that's what we call a per account analysis, right? And our 2 tools in order to do this would be number 1, our T account, wherein the same thing, right? Binabalance lang yung debits and credits in order for you to get your ending balance on a per account basis. And then you have your ledger account. So yung ledger account, honestly, is again similar to your T account. It's just that the ledger account is just a more formalized way in terms of their ledger books, right? So to show to you na everything's tied together, basically, diba, we have journal entry 1. And like what we mentioned, this is a per transaction basis, meaning it affects two components, or at least two components. So it affected cash and owner's drawings. Pero on a per account basis, and we're looking at cash account, we only care about the cash component of 15,000, right? And then yung 15,000 na yan, ipapasok mo siya kay ledger in a more formalized entry. Pero in terms of solving, you can just plug it in terms of your T account, right? So in essence, this is we're still doing the same advanced transaction analysis, but now the second level is just, we're creating journal entries and we're posting to T accounts and ledger accounts, right? So with that said, let's move on to creating journal entries. So again, journal entry is just a formal entry of a transaction to a journal. So basically may transaction ka, and then ginagawa mo lang siyang journal entry. And then nilalagay mo siya sa general journal. So the beauty of journal entries is because it upholds what we call our double entry accounting system. What does that mean? It makes sure that it has at least one debit account. So at least one debit account and at least one credit account. And the reason why I use this journal entry is I wanted to make a point na even though yung debit mo, dalawa, which would be your cash and accounts receivable, they still balance the credit of 10,000, right? So your debits are 3,000 plus 7,000, and then your credit is 10,000. At the end of the day, because of the double entry accounting nature, the debits equal your credits every journal entry. So what I want to highlight is that make sure that every journal entry you make has at least one debit, has at least one credit, and that they balance all the time. That your debit should always equal your credits. No matter kung gaano pa karami yung debit nyo, no matter how many kadami pa yung credits nyo, every journal entry, it should balance. Your debit should equal your credits, right? And to really illustrate the point on parang from advanced transaction analysis, we're gonna leave that behind in chapter 1, and then now moving on, mas madali kasi gumawa ng journal entries kaysa gumawa ng table, right? So now we're gonna shift our mindset in terms of creating our journal entry. So now we move on to 2.5. So are there any volunteers in terms of BE 2.5? Who wants to answer 2.5? Okay, there. Hi, Anna. Yeah, so let's
Hi,
do
sir.
2.5. Yeah. So good morning. So basically,
Morning po.
ang pinapagawa lang niya sa atin is that it gave us 4 transactions. And then ultimately, it wants us to journalize the transaction. Pero, before that, just to make sure na alam natin yung parang how to really think through how to write a journal entry, we'll just do a debit credit analysis. So don't worry, I'll walk you through naman what are the things that we need, right? So let's go. In terms of the 3 things that we're doing, so number 1, we'll do a transaction analysis. Second, we'll identify the T accounts. And then finally, we'll create the journal entry per transaction. So first, transaction. So we open an office as a financial advisor wherein the owner invests 9,000 in cash. So my first question would be, what are the accounts affected, and kindly indicate kung increase or decrease for that particular account, right?
So, cash increase po, and then owner's equity increase.
So correct. Thanks, Anna. So nag-increase si cash, nag-increase si equity. So ganun palagi tayo mag-analyze. What are the accounts affected? And then are they increases in the account or decreases in the account? And then, what are the 2 T accounts na we'll make? Just to make sure na we know what are the accounts affected.
Cash and then owner's capital.
Correct. And then, finally, where would you put the 9,000? Debit or credit in cash?
Cash debit and then owner's capital credit.
Yep. So now we know na nagbabalance pa rin siya. 1 debit, 1 credit, same amount. And then finally, the journal entry would be
Cash debit 9,000 and then owner's capital 9,000 credit.
Correct. Thanks, Anna. So, ganun lang. So, ganito gagawin natin per transaction. Pero honestly, hindi nyo naman kailangan gawin to sa quiz. Ultimately, ang magiging major requirement na would be the journal entry. We just wanted to illustrate ano yung thought process and how everything works together. Okay. So, thank you, Anna, for being patient with us. So, let's apply this to the second transaction. Okay, paano kung nag-pay tayo ng insurance in advance for 6 months using 2,100 cash? What are the two accounts affected for this?
Cash and prepaid insurance.
And then, would they be a decrease or an
Oh.
increase for the particular?
Decrease in cash, increase in prepaid insurance.
Yep. So we have a decrease in cash and prepaid insurance, and then naturally, the T accounts would be our cash and prepaid expenses, right? Or prepaid insurance. So what sa cash, would it be a debit or credit given na nag-decrease siya?
Credit.
Credit. And then for prepaid insurance is an asset, right?
Yes.
So the increase of 2,100 would be a debit or a credit?
Debit.
Correct, Anna. So therefore, our journal entry would be
Debit prepaid insurance 2,100 and then credit cash 2,100.
correct. And then two things pala, sorry, as an assign. So kindly take note na always
The date.
put the date. Pero for receipt, no need na lang. So date. And then yung reference number, usually wala naman kaming ipapa-require. Pero ang pumapasok dyan would be the chart of account. So pare, prepaid insurance is 101. So 101, ganun. And then someone asked, actually, according to Weigand raw, you don't put parang the dollar sign or the amount, the currency in debits and credit. We won't be strict. So your call na lang kung you're gonna put or not. So no worries naman for that. Okay. So moving on, third transaction. What are the accounts affected and increase or decrease ba siya?
Cash increase and then service revenue increase.
Correct. So 3,600. So given a cash would be
Cash will be debit and
okay.
then income or revenue credit.
Okay. Then to summarize, what would be our journal entry therefore?
Debit cash and then credit service revenue 3,600.
Correct. And then finally, tapusin na natin, pay secretary 1,000 salary.
So cash decrease and then salaries expense decrease.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah. So, gets naman. Pero I think, technically, nag-decrease si expense, right?
yeah.
Negative account. Yeah. So, nag-decrease si cash, pero nag-increase si expense. Kaya red pa rin to kasi ultimately, that's a negative on our equity. So, therefore, nag-decrease si cash. So, that would be
Cash credit and then expense debit.
kasi nag-increase siya. Right? Yep. And then ultimately, what would be your journal entry?
Debit salaries expense 1,000, credit cash 1,000.
So thank you so much, Anna. So basically, that's basically the underlying process of how to journal entry. So like what I mentioned, honestly, 2.5 hassle gawin. Pero ultimately, they just want you to really master how to think through, given a transaction. First, analyze what are the accounts affected and then identify if increase or decrease. And then naturally, because of that, you'll be able to identify kung ano ba yung i-debit nyo, ano ba yung i-credit nyo. Right? So ultimately, ganun lang naman mag-journal entry. So we're done with 2.5 in terms of this. And then my number one tip for you. So honestly, in my batch, I'm not really the parang smartest but the reason why I was able to survive BAA was that every time I encounter a new transaction, minimemorize ko na what are the journal entry. Kasi pare-pareho lang naman yan, right? So, correct. Nag-open ka ng something, nag-invest ka ng 9,000 in cash, automatic, regardless of any company, the journal entry would be debit cash, credit owner's equity. Pag nag-pay insurance in advance, that's a sign of a prepaid insurance. So that would be prepaid insurance debit, credit cash. So every time you encounter a new transaction, memorize or list down the journal entry corresponding to that. So paramihan lang naman to eh. Kaya again, hindi mahirap accounting, matrabaho siya. The people that do their parang more exercises will get exposed to new transactions. And because they're exposed to new transactions, they're able to identify paano yung journal entry. So my only caution for the class is that in our exams, in our quizzes, usually ang pamatay is that long prob siya. And then you'll encounter like 2 to 3 transactions na you've never seen in the exercises. Pero definitely they're in Waygut, right? And then syempre, we expect you na alam nyo naman, we don't expect you naman to memorize, right? We expect you to understand so that you'll be able to journalize anything. But for those na kinakabahan for that prospect, the way to compensate for that is kung alam nyo nang mahina kayo in terms of understanding, daanin nyo na lang sa memorization. So, pero make sure na as much as possible, tinatry nyo pa rin intindihin. So meaning, itong transaction na to, ito yung phrase. So given this phrase, ito yung journal entry sa ganito. So that's just my tip for those that are still having a hard time trying to parang make sense the logic behind the accounting rules, right? So now, clear na tayo in terms of our journal entry and in terms of our debits and credits. The question is, how does everything fit together? And then this segues us to our comprehensive problem 2.3. So actually, ito yung pinakamatrabaho out of all the exercises. But I feel like this is also my favorite because it really, pag na-master nyo si 2.3, hindi kayo kakabahan sa any long problems, right? So in essence, 2.3 is, it gave you 12 transactions. So 5 of them happened in the 1st of May, and then the last 7 happened during the month. So for these types of transactions, huwag kayong matakot kung walang date provided. Pare, hindi naman to May 6, right? Hindi naman to May 12. Again, so journal entry, as long as tama si debit and si credit, I won't be strict. So as long as tama yung accounts nyo sa debit, as long as tama yung accounts nyo sa credit and also the value, that will be full points, right? So in essence, we have Kochi services and then ito yung chart of accounts nila. So take note, pag binigay si chart of accounts, make sure you use the accounts provided. So, pare, pag nilagay nyo supplies, pero ang nakalagay sa chart of accounts, office supplies, baka deduction yun. Kasi binigay na sa inyo yung official. So, kindly take note of those intricacies. So, going back to our chapter 1, yung pinakamasakit na ulo natin sa problem, sa chapter 1 was Simiawli, right? So, Simiawli, we demystified it using what we call the transaction analysis roadmap, wherein yung advanced transaction analysis, ginawa muna natin siya, and then from there, we created our 3 financial statements. Our income, our changes in equity, and our balance sheet, right? So again, for this chapter, we're taking it to the next level, right? So now, aside from transaction analysis roadmap, let's expand that to what we call the recording process roadmap. So earlier, we proved na yung advanced transaction analysis helps with your journal entry on a per transaction basis and helps in posting into your T accounts in a per account basis. But in terms of how to attack the problem of si Kochi, basically, ito lang yung kailangan natin gawin. Number 1, first step, let's list all the journal entries of the 12 transactions indicated. Number 2, after natin malist si journal entries, let's summarize them on a per account basis by posting them to a T account, right? Third, from the T accounts, we'll be able to get the ending debit or credit balance of every account. And therefore, we'll use the trial balance to do two things. Number 1, to make sure that our debits are equal to your credits. And then number 2, so that our trial balance will be the one to guide us in creating our income statement, our changes in equity, and our balance sheet, right? So are there any questions before I move on? So for any comprehensive problem for chapter 2, this is the framework to solve for them. Kindly take note of our recording process roadmap, right? So with that said, let's start with the first step, which is actually madali lang naman. Let's first journalize, right? So let's journalize the transaction. So who wants to help me create the journal entries for Kochi? Yeah. Are there any volunteers? Okay, Sky. Okay. Hi, Sky. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Yeah. So
Um,
go ahead.
yes, sir. We debit cash by 40,000 and we credit capital also by 40,000.
Yeah, correct, Sky. So again, so nag-increase si cash ng 40,000 and then nag-increase si owner's equity ng 40,000. So kindly take note lang. So okay lang na you mentioned, Sky, na owner's capital or owner's drawings. Pero kindly take note na let's follow lang
Oh.
the chart of account.
Yes, sir.
But for receipt purposes, yeah, okay lang naman yan. Yep. Let's move on to the second. What would be your journal entry for this?
There is no journal entry po since we only hired the employees.
Okay, correct. So that's good. So actually, usually, nahuhuli yung ibang tao dito. So correct, Sky, na for this, when you hire employees, and then even though merong nakalagay na value, there is no entry because number one, there is no liability yet. Hindi pa sila nagtatrabaho, so we don't put them salary, and therefore there is no expense yet, right? Correct. Good job, Sky. Third, what would be your journal entry for signing a 2-year rental agreement?
We will debit prepaid rent by 24,000 and credit cash by 24,000.
Okay, got it. So prepaid rent 24,000, cash 24,000. Got it. Fourth, we purchased furniture raw and equipment costing 30,000. What would be your journal entry for this?
We debit equipment by 30,000, credit cash by 10,000, and accounts payable by 20,000.
Yep. So basically parang what it was saying was nag-increase si equipment ng 30,000 because binili mo siya. But then nag-increase si cash, ay nag-decrease si cash because nagbayad ka ng 10. Pero nag-increase si accounts payable because may utang ka of 20,000. Correct. And then next would be paid 1,800 for a 1-year insurance policy. So what would we put here?
We debit prepaid insurance by 1,800 and we credit cash by 1,800.
Okay, correct. So 1,800 debit, 1,800 credit for cash, right? And then sige, tuloy na lang natin. So purchase basic office supplies for 420 cash. What would that be?
Debit office supplies by 420 and credit cash by 420.
Yep, correct. And then bumili ka ulit ng second round ng office supplies pero this time on account. So how would that differ from the other one? What would be our journal entry?
We debit office supplies by 1,500, but this time we credit accounts payable by 1,500.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And then so tapos na tayong bumili. So now nag-earn na raw tayo ng revenue of 20,000. What would be your journal entry for this, Sky?
We debit cash by 8,000 and we debit accounts receivable by 12,000. We credit service revenue by 20,000.
Yep, correct. So again, our cash and our accounts receivable both increased of 8,000, 12,000, and then our service revenue, the normal balance of service revenue would be a credit. So it increased also by 20,000. And then as you note, even though dalawa yung debits mo of 8,000 and 12,000, it should still balance to 20,000, right? So before we proceed, I just wanted to share a hypothetical scenario. So you should also know parang how to solve for, pare, binigay ko sa inyo, the service revenue is 20,000. The cash is 15,000. Pag blank si AR, the natural solution there is that kailangan mag-balance si journal entry. And therefore, we squeeze the 5,000 for accounts receivable. So kindly take note lang of those kinds of examples or exercises in the future. Yeah. So let's move on. Sorry, Sky. Yeah. So number 9, you paid naman. So may utang ka na accounts payable pero finally binayaran mo yung 400. So what would be the debit? What would be the journal entry?
We debit accounts payable by 400 and we credit cash by 400.
Yep, correct. And then we received 3,000 from customers in payment of the accounts receivable.
We debit cash by 3,000 and we credit accounts receivable by 3,000.
Yep. So nag-increase si cash, pero bumaba si AR kasi nakuha mo na yung accounts receivable, right? Yep. And then last two, so we received utility bills in the amount of 380 to be paid next month. What would be the journal entry kaya for this one?
We debit utilities expense by 380 and credit accounts payable by 380.
Correct. So don't worry. So I think out of all the journal entries, this is the parang relatively new one. So every time it says to be paid next month, for chapter 2 lang to For chapter 2, we'll credit it to our accounts payable because it's still a liability. You don't have a cash outflow. May expense ka na and then may corresponding liability. So kindly take note. So every time you see company got billed and to be paid next month, automatic, that's an expense accounts payable combo, right? So ganun lang. And then finally, the last entry would be what, Sky?
We debit salaries expense by 6,100 and we credit cash by 6,100.
Okay, correct, perfect. So salaries expense 6,100, cash of 6,100. So actually, thank you so much, Sky. Yeah, so that's basically the first step. We're done with our journal entries. So there were 12 transactions, pero we have 11 journal entries because again, si transaction number 2 is really more of just a description. Nag-hire lang sila, pero wala naman siyang effect in terms of our financial books. So now, the second step is we post to our T accounts, right? And in terms of our T accounts, basically the process lang would be 4 steps. So the first thing is that we should post our journal entries chronologically. Second, we identify the T accounts affected. Third, we plug in our debits and credits. And then fourth would be our total accounts. So for this particular, it's very procedural. So I'll take this one. So I'll take this step. Pero kindly take note paano nangyari or parang what would be the process, right? So super important to because I'm sure lalabas posting. I'm sure lalabas trial balance, right? So kindly make sure na you follow how we solve. So again, step 1, we journalize all the transactions. Step 2, we're now ready to post, right? So we post chronologically, meaning we'll start with journal entry number 1. So I see the journal entry number 1. And then I ask myself, what are the T accounts affected? So na-mention niya, cash. So may cash. So next, na-mention niya may R Shaw capital or owner's capital, right? So I identify the T accounts for journal entry number 1, right? And then I plug in my debits and credits. So debit cash, credit, owner's capital. Okay? I'm done with journal entry number 1. Again, we post journal entries chronologically. So tapos na tayo kay 1. Let's go to 2. The next question I ask myself, what are the accounts affected? Prepaid rent and cash. May cash na tayong T account. Pero wala pa tayong prepaid rent. So I'll make a T account for prepaid rent. And then I will debit prepaid rent by 24,000 or post it and then cash 24,000, right? So may running balance na tayo kay cash, right? Next, journal entry. Journal entry number 3. Okay, what are the accounts affected? Equipment. So we have equipment. So equipment, so wala pa tayo nun. Right? So gawa tayo ng T account. Cash, meron na. Accounts payable, wala pa rin. So gumawa rin ako ng accounts payable na T account. Right? So kindly note na I'm making the T accounts as I go. The reason why I'm doing this is so that hindi ako ma-overwhelm and I only attack it on a per transaction basis. Right? Okay. So the next step is debit equipment. So, yep. Credit cash, correct? And then credit accounts payable. Then journal entry 4. Prepaid insurance, meron ba tayong account na ganun? Wala pa. So I'll make a T account. Cash, meron. So okay na. So again, debit prepaid insurance, credit cash. Right? Journal entry 5. Office supplies. Parang wala pa tayong T account. So gawa tayo. Again, debit office supplies, credit cash. Right? Oh, we're done with the first half. Next half, journal entry 6. Office supplies, accounts payable. Okay, wala tayong bagong accounts. So we just post. Debit 15 office supplies. The credit accounts payable 1,500. Right? Journal entry 7. Cash accounts receivable and service revenue. Parang wala pa akong accounts receivable. Parang wala pa rin akong service revenue. So gumawa ako ng dalawang T accounts. Right? And then I post. So debit 8,000 cash, debit AR 12,000, credit service revenue of 20,000. Right? And then journal entry 8. Accounts payable cash, meron na tayo. So post, let's post. So debit AP 400, credit cash 400. Journal entry 9. Cash AR yung affected. So meron tayong accounts na ganun. So debit cash 3,000, credit AR 3,000. Journal entry 10. Utilities expense. Parang wala pa tayong T account na ganun. So I'll make. And then, we have accounts payable, which we have. So now we can post debit utilities expense, credit accounts payable, and then finally, journal entry 11 would be salaries expense na wala pa ako, so gumawa ko ng T account of 6,100 and then cash. So debit 6,100, cash of 6,000, credit of 6,100. So after the journal entries, we posted. That's the second step, right? The last step is that we need to total the accounts. So basically, I need someone to help me tabulate. So is there anyone? So sino yung parang sa tingin nila tama yung ending balance nila? Is there anyone? Okay. So again, since procedural lang, let's walk through it together na lang. So I'll start with my cash, right? So I'll first start by adding my debits. 40,000 plus 8,000 plus 3,000. So my subtotal debit for cash is 51,000. Now I need to get the subtotal of my credit. So 24,000 plus 10,000 plus 1,800 plus 420. Wait, sorry. Ulit. 24,000 plus 10,000 plus 1,800 plus 420 plus 400 plus 61 is 42,720. I have a subtotal of credit of 42,720, right? And then the last step for this is pagbabanggain natin. We have 51,000 na debit, which is the normal account of an asset, that's a cash. And then ibabangga natin, so we subtract 42,720. And therefore, ultimately, the ending balance of our cash is 8,280, right? For the others, mas madali. Actually, cash lang naman pahirap eh. So the others would be credit balance of owner's capital or ARSA capital of 40,000. Debit ending balance of prepaid rent of 24,000. Debit ending balance of 30,000 for equipment. And then si accounts payable we solve. So obviously 400 na to. And then we solve for the subtotal of the credit side. So we have 20,000 plus 1,500 plus 380 is 21,880, right? So now, pagbabanggain natin, the normal balance of our accounts payable is a credit. And therefore, the positive one here is the 21,880, right? So minus 400. We have 21,480, right? And then the others, so we go na to prepaid insurance. The ending balance of prepaid insurance would be a debit of 1.8. For office supplies, it's 420 plus 1.5. So office supplies, it's 1,920. So debit. Sa accounts receivable, we have 12,000 na debit and then 3,000 na credit. So pagbabanggain natin siya. So 12,000 is the normal debit balance, and therefore the 3,000 is a subtraction to that. So you have 9,000 debit balance of AR, and then service revenue is just credit 20,000, utilities expense is 380, and then salaries expense would be debit of 6,100. So that ends our second step, which is posting to our T accounts. So the last step would be to create our trial balance. So again, the trial balance will help us do two things. Number one, it will make sure, or it will ensure us na our debits are equal to our credits. And then second, that will be our tool in order to help create our financial statements. So for this number, so I think I'll need help from the class. Is there anyone who wants to create the trial balance? If none, I'll call. Okay. Russ, yeah, there. Hi, Russ. Good morning. Yeah. So let's take it na lang per step. So step one would be the trial balance format. So Russ, can you help us parang determine what are the three headers of our yung nasa taas nung trial balance? Yeah.
Kochi services, then trial balance, then May 31, 2020 po.
Correct. So similarly to our balance sheet, our trial balance is a snapshot of our debits and credits. So as of siya. And then, in terms of the format, paano natin i-divide yung, what are the major components of our trial balance, Ross?
The accounts, the debits, then the credit.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So, yeah. So, correct. So, accounts, debits, and credits. Okay. With that said, we can proceed na with listing all of our assets. So, the downside of my procedure is that medyo kalat si assets, right? I mean, si cash, si prepaid rent. Pero hopefully color-coded naman siya so you'll be able to identify or take a mental note which ones are assets when you do your own T accounts. So let's try to list down by liquidity, Russ. So what would be your first asset kaya?
Cash po.
Correct. Of
Debit of 8,000 to 80.
correct. What would be our next asset?
Accounts receivable with a debit of 9,000.
Okay, got it. And then
Office of supplies with a debit of 1,920.
yep, correct.
Prepaid insurance with a debit of 1,800.
Yeah.
Then prepaid rent with a debit of 24,000.
Yep.
And then equipments with a debit of 30,000.
Got it. Do we have any other assets left or wala na?
Wala na po.
Correct, Ross. So next would be second step, let's list all of our liabilities. And our liabilities, what would be the balance kaya of those? Debit or credit, Ross?
Credit po.
Correct. So what would be our liabilities for this particular exercise?
First, the accounts payable of 21,100. Ay, 21,480 pala.
Okay lang. Yeah, correct. And then, do we have any other liabilities?
None na po.
Correct. And then the third step then therefore is let's list naman the owner's capital and the owner's drawings. So for owner's capital, what would we do for that?
We credit the 40,000 po.
Correct. So, do we have owner's drawings here?
None.
Okay. Yeah. Pero, question, Ross. Pag meron tayong owner's drawings, where do we put it? Debit or credit sa trial balance?
Sa debit side na.
Debit. And then, is it positive or negative?
Wait. Wala pong positive or negative.
Correct. So, parang I just wanted to highlight na you never subtract in your debit side, right? So, I think we'll be able to illustrate it sa expense later, Ross. Pero, correct, na parang wala namang positive, negative in trial balance. Yeah. So, let's list our revenues. What would be our revenues for this?
20,000.
Okay, and then finally, our last step would be list our expenses, which would,
First would be salaries expense of 6,100. Then utilities expense of 380. Both on debit.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ross. So I think that clearly illustrates naman na how to create trial balance. And then to your point, Ross, so definitely wala siyang positive or negative. So kindly take note na when you're solving for the total ending balance, you don't subtract your expenses, you don't subtract your owner's drawings, right? So let's solve just to make sure na we'll be able to account for it properly, right? So 8280 plus 9,000 plus 1920 plus 18 plus 24,000 plus 30,000 plus 6,100 plus 380 is 81,480. Yeah, 81,480. So kindly take note na sa salaries expense, utilities expense, even if you have owner's drawings, you don't subtract, right? Some of my batchmates kasi, in the first year, hirap sila mag-balance, parang nagugulat sila, hindi nag-balance si debit and credit. And then when you look at their trial balance, some of them subtract their expenses. Don't, right? So let's remove any signs here. Yung values lang and then you add them together just to make sure that your debits and your credits match. So for a good measure, let's just add the credit side. 21,480 plus 40,000 plus 20,000. 81,480, right? So nag-balance siya, right? So now we go to the last phase of basically making financial statements, right? So actually, this is very similar. It's just that instead of the advanced transaction analysis, we're using our trial balance instead to come up with our income statement. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer to discuss income statement? So actually, usual process lang sa chapter 1. Is there anyone who wants? Ayan, there. Hi, Denise. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
So let's help me walk through na lang tayo sa income statement. So step 1, what would be our format for income statement?
We'll start po with the heading, sir. So it will start po with the company name, so Kochi Services,
Yeah.
and then income statement, and then for the month ending May 31, 2020 po.
Okay, for the
And then
month.
we have income and expenses and net income or net loss.
Correct. Yeah. And then what would be our total revenues? What would be our revenues? Yeah.
Our income po, our revenues will be service revenue, which is $20,000 po.
Yep. And then yun na lang yung revenues. Wala nang others.
Wala na po, sir.
Correct. So our total revenues would be 20,000. And then what would be our expenses for this?
Our expenses po should be ordered according to descending. So salaries expense po, which is $6,100, and then utilities expense po, $380, totaling to $6,480 po.
Yep, correct. And then ultimately what would be so last step would be our net income or net loss, which would be
Net income po of $13,520 po.
13,000. Yeah, 13,520. Thank you so much, Denise. Yeah. So actually, yun, parang I hope na now parang second nature na to make income statement. So parang ngayon parang it's less stressful given na hindi na siya advanced transaction analysis. Mas madali na hopefully see trial balance. Now let's move on. So kindly take note na this portion lang yung gagamitin natin in terms of our income statement, right? So now itaas natin si income statement. Let's make our changes in equity. Is there anyone who wants to discuss changes in equity for this? If none, I will call. We can go with, what's the first name? Mariko. Hi Mariko, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Sige.
So for
the format muna tayo, Mariko.
yung header po, Kochi Services, tapos statement of changes in owner's equity, and then for the month ending May 31, 2020.
Okay. And then what would be the major components of any changes in equity statement?
The beginning capital, and then the addition of investment and net income, and then last drawings, if any. And then the result would be the ending capital.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Marco. So now let's go with our beginning capital. So
Zero po.
Yeah, correct. So 0, C beginning capital. And then what would be our additions?
Investment and net income.
Okay. So
For investment, 40,000. And then for net income, 13,520.
yeah, which would give us a total additions of
53,520.
yeah, okay. So 53,520. Yep. And then
And then,
yeah.
for drawings po, we don't have any.
Yep, 0. So 0. And therefore ending capital would be
53,000.
yeah, 53,520. Yep, correct. Thank you so much, Marco. So for this, kindly take note na yung relevant portion lang ng trial balance would be our show capital, right? And then yung iba, kukunin na natin kay income statement. Finally, the last of this comprehensive problem, the balance sheet. Is there anyone who's interested? If none, maybe Mavic. Hi, good morning. Baka you can help us for this.
Hi sir, good morning. Am I audible po?
Yes, perfect. Maganda yung quality. Yep. So first would be the format. So what would be the format of our balance sheet?
First is going to be Kochi Services and then followed by statement of financial position. And then afterwards, we have to take note that we list it as of May 31, 2020 instead of for the month ending something.
Yeah.
And then later on, we have to list the assets, liabilities, and owner's equity.
Correct. Yeah. And then, sorry. But so what would be your total assets? So what would be your assets for this Mavic?
Assets are going to be cash, which is equal to $8,280. Accounts receivable, which is 9,000. Supplies is 1,920. Prepaid insurance is 1,800. Prepaid rent is 24,000. Equipment is 30,000.
Okay. And then what would be the total assets for this?
Total assets would be equal to $75,000.
Okay. So basically you add everything together and then you will get 75,000. Correct, Mavic. Thank you. And then let's proceed na to our total liabilities.
So under liabilities, you only have one, which is accounts payable, which is going to be equal to 21,480.
Yep. And then before we go to owner's equity, what is your expectation dun sa ending balance ng total of liabilities and owner's equity?
It will be equal to the total assets as well.
Yeah, 75,000, right? So pero given the ending capital of 53,520, which we get from RE, we can just total everything, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mavic. So again, the last step na lang would be we check if balanced, right? So yeah, there. So actually, that ends like the hardest problem, I think, for the, or pinakamatrabahong problem for the exercise. So yung last would be, let's just revisit the last two. Okay, so we have a question here. Thank you so much. So after doing the T accounts, do we have to group them based on the type of account they fall under, or you're not strict? Sorry, follow-up question to this would be, what do you mean by group them based on type? Like, for example, like right here. Okay. So for me, honestly, hindi ako strict in term, hindi, okay lang. Okay lang. Yeah. So for this, no need. I'm not strict. Parang as long as tama. What I'll be strict about would be number 1, the ending balances of every T account. Number 2, kung tama ba yung pagcategorize nyo. In terms of like the debits and the credits. That's what I'll be strict about. Pero yung parang kailangan magkakatabi sila. No need. Kasi actually ako, hindi ko nga na-anticipate na hindi magkakasya, so I had to trim down some. So as long as tama yung ending balances of your T accounts, that will be our basis, right? So as you can see, journal entries will be our foundation, and then the diretso, sobrang procedural na the rest of our processing record process roadmap, right? So for the last 15 minutes, we'll just revisit naman our trial balance. So we'll quickly touch upon lang na, okay, this is how I really simplify chapter 2. May transaction ka, so in an accountant's perspective, the formal entry of a transaction is a journal entry. So a transaction, we turn into a journal entry. Conversely, a T account is the informal way of solving. And then the formal version of a T account is a ledger account, right? So it's the same. It's just that mas marami lang arte si ledger. For this, it's very procedural. So kindly take note na lang of the proper format of what a ledger account should look like. Like for example, yung reference is not the reference for your chart of accounts. The reference is in particular to the journal entry or the code of the journal entry. What do I mean by this? So, di ba, this is the more formal version of posting, which is parang not really that intuitive. Very form-based siya. But this is the formal entry or formal journal entry. This is the formal account ledgers. So, when we post, basically may reference of 101. This is something you found in chart of accounts. So, si cash, pupunta siya sa cash ledger account. Pero as you can see, the reference here is not the 101, pero the journal entry 1, because that's the reference code. For owner's equity, pupunta siya sa owner's equity account ledger, April 1 of 15,000. So as you can see, you split your journal entry per account. So in essence, when you do T account, ito yung ginagawa niyo. Pero the ledger one is the more hassle one. But it required pa rin naman syempre na if ledger account yung papagawa. But for solving, pinakamabilis T account, right? So with that said, let's master the trial balance. So what is a trial balance? So again, the trial balance lists your accounts and balances at a specific point in time. So it's a snapshot of your debits and credits. And therefore, in the heading, it's as of the end date or whatever date you're reporting. So there are two things why trial balances are so important. Number 1, it helps us check whether your debits is equal to your credits. So in the Meowly, it helped us identify na 30,200 and 30,200. Now, I want to stress this point. Yung debits nyo of 30,200 and your credits of 30,200 does not mean na your total assets is 30,200. Iba yung binabalance nyo sa balance sheet, right? And then another note why magkaiba sila, because yung expenses nyo and your drawings are not negative. You just add all of them. You add your debits, you add your credits. That's it. Wala siyang positives or negatives, as Russ would put it, right? So that would be the first purpose of your trial balance. The second purpose of your trial balance is it helps you create your financial statements, right? So basically, you have your income statement sa baba, right? And then you have your changes in equity in the middle. And then you'll have your balance sheet in your top, right? So using your trial balance, you'll be able to create your balance sheet, your changes in equity, and your income statement. So now, the thing is, in trial balance, there are a lot of limitations, particularly when it comes to errors. So basically, there are some errors that you wouldn't even know, even if you have a perfectly balanced trial balance, right? So for example, if a transaction is completely omitted, hindi yan lalabas sa trial balance and therefore hindi mo siya mahuhuli. Number 2, kapag incorrect yung entries, meaning iba yung account na ginamit nyo, iba yung value, as long as tama yung debit and credit nyo, magbabalance pa rin yan, even though mali siya, right? Third, the journal entry was posted twice. So pare, AR was 100, ano ba? Cash, owner's equity, right? 100, 100. So magbabalance siya. And then pinost mo ulit 100, 100. Yung total nun, total debits would be 200, total credits is 200. Hindi mo mapapansin na mali ka na pala, right? And then incorrect accounts are used in journalizing. And then you have your offsetting errors. So these are some errors na you should look out for. Transposition error, meaning 824 talaga yung tama, pero napagbaliktad mo si 2 at saka si 4. That's a transposition error. There's also this thing called sliding error, wherein yung decimal point mo is before 8, so 8.24, pero na-move mo to 82.4, diba? And then finally, data entry, 100 siya pero nalagay mo 10. So these are some of the errors in trial balance. So the next question is, how do we correct for errors, right? So let's go to 2.15. Is there anyone who wants to recite 2.15? If none, I will. Si Clarence. Okay. Hi, Clarence. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. So for this, basically we'll just follow the chart provided. So let's look at the transaction and then let's ask ourselves, magbabalance ba? What are the difference? And what is the larger column? Meaning, mas malaki ba si debit or mas malaki ba si credit? Ganun. Yeah.
Okay, so for number 1, so will it balance? No. Tapos the difference is $525 and the larger column is debit.
Yep, correct. Because hindi niya lagay si 525 dun sa credit side. And therefore, mas mataas ng 525 si debit. Yep,
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Number 2?
For number 2 naman, will it balance? Yes, it will balance. So there's no difference. So $0 ang difference and there's no larger column.
Yeah. So correct, Clarence. So for this is actually the errors na medyo scary. Kasi mali yung nalagay mo, pero magbabalance pa rin siya, right? So make sure na tama pa rin yung accounts niyo. So the reason why we're illustrating this is so that you can double check. Yep. So number 3, Clarence.
So number 3, will it balance? Yes, it will balance. And then so $0 difference, then there's no larger column.
Yep, correct. And then number 4.
For number 4, no, it will not balance. So the difference is actually $415 and mas malaki yung credit.
Yep. So correct. So the reason why hindi ito nag-balance, even though it posted twice, kasi yung debit portion niya, hindi na post twice. Yung credit version lang niya, right? Of 415. And that's why si credit yung mas mataas, right?
Ayan. So number 5 naman, will it balance? Yes. Difference, $0, tapos no larger column.
Yep. And then lastly, number 6.
Yeah. Lastly, number 6, will it balance? No. Difference will be $27 and the larger column is debit.
Yep. So my question is, how were you able to solve for 27, Clarence?
Sir, based on the error. So the debit of 625 was posted as 652. So I got the difference of 652 and 625 and the result
Mhm.
27.
Yeah. So the larger column is debit, meaning to bring it back to 625, we have to subtract 27, right? Mhm.
Yes, sir.
So yan, actually yun lang naman. Thank you so much, Clarion. So very clear in terms of the analysis. So don't panic. So every time you see an error, you ask yourself, will it balance? Ano ba yung differences niya and what should be the larger column? So for these types of questions, baka you can expect it as a short prob ganyan in the quizzes in the exams. Kasi honestly, hindi ko pa nakita naman yung quiz. But yun, another thing I noticed sa quiz, everyone did well. As in, perfect yata yung, as in everyone got the changes in owner's equity. Ang major casualty, I think around 30% got it wrong, was the last number. So another thing na I wanted you to know is sa accounting, alam ko meron mga numbers na pinakamahaba gawin, right? And then meron mga short prob na mabilis gawin. So usually, ang nangyayari if you answer it chronologically, pagod ka na. Kasi ang dami mo nang ginawa parang nag-transaction analysis ka na, nag-balance ka na, nag-accounts ka. Tapos yung last number, parang simple equation lang. Pero dun actually yung bulk ng mistakes ng iba. So 30% of the people got that wrong. So wag kayong mapagod dun sa ano. So make sure na you pay equal attention kasi the statement of changes owner's equity in that quiz is equivalent to the solving for that short problem. So, yun lang. So, don't take these types for granted. So, yung error, definitely hindi yun naman siguro lalabas yun sa long prob, pero it's probably gonna be like a short prob or something like that. So, don't take that for granted kasi pang-ipon rin yan ng points. So, in the last 6 minutes, let's answer the last one, right? And for this, basically, I'll introduce a framework to simplify everything, right? So basically, ang nangyari, may trial balance na binigay, and then shocks di nag-balance. Actually, when you're rechecking your answers, pagdasal nyo na if ever may magkakamali kayo, sana hindi siya nag-balance para talaga makita nyo. Mas nakakatakot yung kala nyo nag-balance pero mali pala yung balance, right? So, but for this particular scenario, hindi siya nag-balance. So clearly, there are errors, right? So basically, how do we make an adjusted trial balance? So same way, let's first look at it in a per transaction, and then every transaction, let's ask ourselves, what is the error? What should be the correct treatment? And what is the key adjustment, right? A 2,000 purchase of props on credit was not posted. This type of error is called an error of omission, right? Dapat in-entry mo, pero hindi mo nilagay, right? So what is no entry was posted and therefore it was not put in the trial balance. So what should be is that it should have been posted, right? As debit equipment and props 2,000, credit accounts payable 2,000. Next, therefore the key adjustment is we have to increase our debits and we have to increase our credits by 2,000 in their corresponding accounts. And therefore in this table we just included 3 columns. Account to be adjusted, debit and credit. So plus 2,000 debit for equipment, plus 2,000 accounts payable. Next, second transaction, the balance of dancing fees was overstated by 400. So for this, the error is the dancing fees of 12,400, ito yung nakalagay dun sa trial balance, is overstated by 400. What should be the correct treatment? Therefore, 12,400 minus 400. So in essence, ang tama niyang balance is 12,000, right? And therefore, ang key adjustment mo is subtract by 400 to correct the overstatement. So again, pag overstatement, you have to subtract to bring it to the right number. Kapag understated, you have to add back in order to bring it back to the right balance, right? So yun. Therefore, our dancing fees, credit should be subtracted by 400. I have a question for the class. Dancing fees. credit yung normal account niya, kindly indicate in the chat if it's what is it, a revenue or an expense? Yep. So, yeah, revenue, right? So don't get confused. Kahit dancing fees, revenue yan. Because dancing fees meaning dance instructor siya, right? Yun. Third, a debit to accounts receivable of 100 was posted as 10. So this is a data entry error. And therefore, yung AR should have been debited by 10. Was debited by 10. Pero ang totoo niyang account is that it should have been debited by 100. Our key adjustment, therefore, is that you debit 90 to AR. Meaning, understated siya ng 90. Therefore, we have to add back 90 in order to bring it up to 100, right? So again, ulitin natin using a calculator. Yung debit balance round ng AR was 10, but in reality, it's 100. So it's understated. What do you need to add to 10 in order to make it 100? 90, right? Or relatively, 100 minus 10 is equal to 9. Same way how Clarence was able to get the 27 in the earlier exercise, right? And therefore, the third one is accounts receivable plus 90 debit. 4. A 700 debit to drawing account was posted as debit to Jenny Lee Capital. So yan, the problem with this is that mali yung account na nalagyan mo. So anong ginawa mo ba? So what is your error, right? You debited the Jenny Lee Capital by 700, which is weird because the Jenny Lee Capital has a normal account of credit, right? So parang double whammy. And then, ideally, what you should have done was that the drawings dapat yung dinebit mo ng 700, right? And therefore, our key adjustment would be two things. We have to reverse or credit Jenny Lee Capital of 700. Bakit credit? Kasi dinebit mo ng 700 eh. In order to offset a debit of 700, to reverse it, you have to credit 700, right? And then debit properly the 700 to drawings, right? So their credit in essence, plus 700 credit for Jenny Lee Capital, plus 700 for Jenny Lee drawings. Last, the balance of electricity and gas expense was listed as 5.2. The correct balance is 2.5. So again, this is overstated, right? It should have been debited by 2.5 only. Therefore, ano yung adjustment natin? 5.2 minus 2.5. We have to, so overstated siya by 2.7, and therefore we have to deduct by 2.7 in order to get the key adjustment. So decrease debit by 2,700. Right? So again, that ends our first step in terms of adjusting the trial balance. With that, we're able to determine our debits and our credits. The second step is we apply this to our trial balance. So basically, equipment and props. So basically, parang mangyayari lang dyan is equipments and props. So 5,000 plus 2, magiging 7,000. And then accounts payable plus 2,000. Our AP is at 3,000 right now. So plus 2,000, magiging 5,000. Dancing fees, subtract ng 400. So like what we mentioned, 12,000. AR plus 90 raw. So our AR of 410 plus 90. Magiging 500 si AR. Si Jenny Lee Capital, 2,400, 24,300. We add the credit of 700. $25,000. And then Jenny Lee drawings. So yung drawings natin is where? 800. So 800 plus 700. 1.5. And then finally, electricity, gas, and expense, which is 5.2 minus 2.7, 2.5. And then ultimately, if you add everything together, that should be 52,000 debit, 52,000 credit. So we have the adjusted trial balance, right? So the next is the income statement, wherein you just look at the format, the typical format, and then we get the total revenues. So the service revenue of 12,000. So total revenues is 12,000. Total expenses, wages muna tayo because ito yung pinakamalaki. Advertising expense, electricity, gas, and then interest expense. Sorry, I think dapat electricity and gas should have come second, right? And then you'll have 9,000, giving your net income of 3,000. Yun. So actually, that ends our exercise breakdown for chapter 2. So before we end the recording, are there any questions? Yeah. Are there any questions regarding the quiz, regarding the exercises? Yep. So the question was, can we also use statement of comprehensive income similar instead of income statement? Yes, you can. So actually, that's the more formal statement. Sorry, tamad ako. So I put lang income statement or owner's equity, but the formal names talaga would be statement of comprehensive income. Are there any other questions before we end today? So some things to note. So because we have a Facebook group already, kindly make sure you're part. Every time I post a video, parang I'll always make sure to post. So check na lang. So I'll make it public na lang. So check the playlist na I link into our Facebook group if na-upload na yung lecture for today. Second, I already uploaded both the handout and the exercise for chapter 3. Again, due siya Tuesday, pero I will move the deadline to 10 a.m. so before class time. So make sure you submit. And then we have a quiz again next Monday, chapter 2. So for those, so I'm again super happy with the class. Really proud na our average is like 19.15. I think yung mga iba got around 16, 17. I think mostly because hindi siya dahil hindi nila gets. It's more of parang they missed something lang or sa theory meron lang silang hindi alam. So I'm sure I'm happy na everyone naman can understand the first chapter. Now, sa second chapter, relatively it's still the same as chapter 1. Pero just huwag kayong mahiya if hindi nyo pa gets yung debit or credit. Again, you can use the Calendly link in our Facebook group to schedule consultation. The reason why I'm advocating for this is that chapter 3, accruals and deferrals, medyo dun marami nalilito. So my request, kung kaya nyo mag-advance read for chapter 3, advance read nyo kasi ang pumapatay sa mga tao sa midterms, accruals, deferrals kasi hindi nila magets yung timing difference and inventory. Pero inventory, we'll get to that. Medyo malayo pa yun. Pero yung first kalaban natin would be accruals and deferrals. Pero definitely don't take for granted your recording process quiz. Again, as illustrated by quiz 1, the recipe for success is memorize your theory and then make sure na in solving, you look at the required first so that you know, paano ko ba isosolve ito? Yun. And then last would be for the quiz, I'm not sure kung magiging timed na siya. Stay tuned for announcement. So unfortunately, like what we mentioned, kaming mga accounting profs, we really value honor and excellence. So again, honor comes before excellence. And unfortunately, in some classes, parang meron nang nag-cheat na nahuli. So parang those people were sanctioned already and then parang given the necessary deductions. And then unfortunately, because of that, even though we want to accommodate everyone for online classes, the sad thing about that is because some people cheated, we have to be stricter in the implementation of our online quizzes. So right now, for this week, we're gonna be deliberating kung ita-time na namin yung quiz. Meaning, you can still take it from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Pero we'll limit it na when you access the form, you only have 2 hours or 1 hour, depending on what we discuss later on how to solve it. So please, again, I'd rather na you over-consult. Like, magli-leave pa ako para lang mag-consult with you. Wag lang kayo mag-cheat. So, because again, it only hurts you because in the future, when you're in a high ranking position, there will be times that the answers will be coming from you. And if you don't have anyone to copy from, then wala, parang nga ka lang, right? And then second, kawawa naman the people that really put in the effort and then now affected sila because now magiging time na yung quiz. Or hihirapan yung quiz because para mas mahirap mag-cheat, right? So again, I really trust in the effort you put in. Even if you don't like accounting, there's still, values to be learned in the rigor that, we're setting forth. Yeah. So I think there's 2 messages here. So, okay. So first question, explanations actually hindi. Actually, I put explanations para lang to guide you. Pero again, for me, basic requirements lang for journal entries, tama si debit, tama si credit. And then the date siguro. Yun, those 3. Anna, will we receive our corrected quizzes? I will double check if we can return quizzes given the recent things that happened. Pero what I can assure you, kindly check our Facebook group before our Thursday class. I will conduct a poll on when we'll discuss the quiz. But what I can assure you is I will give the feedback and how to solve before your chapter 2 quiz. So that the people that want to, optimize how to solve can solve. Yun. So those are the last minute reminders. Meron pa bang pahabol questions before I end the recording? Okay. Okay, sige. So, I think, yeah. So, and then for the exercises, so general question. For me, definitely, syempre, we still grade their exercises, pero may leniency siya in a way na as long as nagre-recite kayo sa class. So for example, may mistake kayo sa exercise, parang shocks, nagdi-discuss tayo, mali ako dito, right? Parang one mistake, if you reset one time, nababawi. So as long as you can technically, if recite lang kayo ng recite sa class, you'll get a perfect in your exercise. Pero syempre, right, hindi ko kayo bibigyan ng perfect in the participation if there's a missed submission. Pero dun sa mga parang 1 mistakes, 2 mistakes, those could be easily be offset by reciting in class. So in my head, I'm keeping mental notes rin on the frequency of recitation so that kapag wala nag-volunteer, I try to give the opportunity to the ones na, kailangan maghabol. Yun. So yeah. And then in terms of returning the exercises, I'll get back. Yun. So I think that's it. If there are no more questions, thank you everyone. Again, really happy na we did well in the first quiz. Tuloy-tuloy na natin hanggang midterms para, kakainin nyo na lang yan by midterms time. Yeah, yun. So have a great day. Thank you so much.